All right, I see the room filling up. It always takes about 12 seconds, and I'm going to start talking slowly as that happens. I want to welcome everybody to Rewiring America's Electric Explainer, wherein we will try to unpack the provisions in the Inflation Reduction Act, which is no small feat to accomplish in about 40 minutes. We have a great team assembled here, people who have worked tirelessly to advance this legislation, and I know they will no doubt inform in their spoken presentation, as well as answer all the questions you may have. So we're going to get right to it. Ari will kick us off unpacking some of the provisions themselves, and then I'll let everyone else speak. And if you have a question, we ask that you input it into the chat, and we will call upon you to ask the question out loud. If you don't want to, just indicate as much in the chat. And if you want to direct your question at a particular person, also indicate that as well. Without further ado, let's kick it off, Ari.
Wonderful. Thanks, Sarah. And thank you, everyone, for being here today. Senators Heinrich and Smith, it's wonderful to have you here and your leadership always. And Leah, it's fun to continue doing the circuit with you. There are two numbers we should focus on when we talk about the Inflation Reduction Act: 41% and $1,800. 41% is the share of inflation American families are experiencing that is the direct result of fossilflation, the energy bill tax we pay for running our lives on fossil fuels. That's the cars we drive, how we heat the air and water in our homes, cook our food, and dry our clothes. $1,800 is the amount of money the average American household would have saved this past year if all of those machines we rely on were efficient and electric, not expensive and polluting. The Inflation Reduction Act tackles the first number by giving American families support to benefit from the second number as they replace their cars, furnaces, water heaters, cooktops, and dryers. And those aren't one-year savings, they are every year savings. They are a structural wealth transfer back to everyday American families. At a time and in an economy where half of American families cannot afford a $400 emergency expense, and where a $100 increase in the median rent results in a 9% increase in our homelessness rate, that is a very big deal. There is a third number that is relevant to mention too: 42%. That is the amount of energy-related emissions that come from the machines we rely on to get to work and to keep our families warm, fed, and comfortable. The simple truth is that we will not have a chance of hitting our climate targets and staying inside of 1.5 degrees Celsius warming unless we electrify the 1 billion machines across our 121 million households in this country. We have to change the market default so that the efficient electric machine is the most affordable and convenient thing for us to buy and have installed, so that every time a water heater in America fails, we don't have to worry about locking in another 15 years of emissions with its replacement and unnecessarily costing a family thousands of dollars they could have kept for themselves. The amazing news about climate is that the answer runs through all of us, our homes, our businesses, and our communities. And it's an answer that delivers us more, not less. But transforming the market so that we rewire America's households is a big task. It's a transformation that needs to be catalyzed. The Inflation Reduction Act does exactly that. It's an incredibly smart and tailored set of policies that define a win-win-win for the American family, our communities and economy, and the planet overall. It is the result of an incredible amount of work on the part of advocates, yes, but really by leaders like Senators Heinrich and Smith, who are themselves also the co-chairs of the Bicameral Electrification Caucus. The country and the planet owe them a debt of gratitude for generations to come. Instead of closing with a number, I'd like to close with a word: abundance. Because that is really what the Inflation Reduction Act is about: delivering abundance to American families and communities. To illustrate that, I ask you to consider this. As we electrify the economy, our climate must do, we will triple electricity demand in this country, but we will also cut in half the amount of energy the economy requires to run. We will still be the largest economy in the world with a growing GDP, but we will be using half the energy. And that is because electric machines are so much more efficient than fossil fuel powered ones. Think about what that means. All the GDP and productivity at half the cost. It is a transformation of our economy that permanently makes American families and communities more wealthy, more healthy, and more secure. Let's get this Inflation Reduction Act passed and signed so Americans can start taking advantage of its benefits next week. Thank you.
Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us again. Rewiring America has been a tremendous partner in our effort to advance the vision of widespread electrification in the US. And we have a growing and highly motivated coalition of support all across this country now. It's also my honor to be joined today by my colleague and my fellow co-founder and co-chair of the Electrification Caucus, Senator Tina Smith of Minnesota. And I am so grateful for Senator Smith's steady and determined leadership over these past months and year, really, to make sure that we found a path forward on clean energy and electrification investments. I'm not sure anyone would ever describe the United States Senate as the most efficient machine, but the clean energy and electrification investments that we ultimately secured in the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022 represent by far the most significant steps that Congress has ever taken to spur the widespread deployment of highly efficient, fully electric, and climate pollution-free technologies. These electric technologies, from air source heat pumps for home heating and water systems to induction stovetops and electric clothes dryers, have already leapfrogged their fossil fuel powered alternatives in terms of both efficiency and performance. They can create major health benefits by replacing dirty fossil furnaces and gas stoves that are burning dangerous compounds into the indoor air in our homes. And that means less children with asthma and less seniors with breathing problems that many of us don't even realize are being caused by the appliances in our homes. And when you pair them with clean and carbon-free, pollution-free power generation, something the Inflation Reduction Act also invests in substantially through the revamped investments and production tax credits, these electric technologies are the tools that will allow us to solve the climate crisis. Because they're so much more efficient and less expensive to operate, they'll also help families all across our country realize significant savings on their energy bills. And this is particularly important at a time when so many Americans have been experiencing the pinch from inflation at the gas pump and in their gas and utility bills. These cost savings are one of the major reasons why many of the nation's top economists have endorsed the Inflation Reduction Act. Let me quote from a letter sent to congressional leadership and signed by 126 leading economists, including former Treasury secretaries, a former Congressional Budget Office director, Nobel Prize winners, and former Federal Reserve vice chairs. Quote, "This legislation represents the single biggest step to date in tackling the climate crisis. It makes key investments to incentivize the transition to cleaner energy sources and greater efficiency. It also invests in the current energy distribution system to make it more resilient, lowers energy costs for families, and helps protect US family budgets against future shocks." That is exactly right. And that's exactly why we need to move quickly to pass the Inflation Reduction Act into law. Now, before I finish up, I want to go a little more into detail on the specific piece of the bill that I spent so much time working on, the $4.5 billion for new point of sale consumer rebates for electric household appliances. These rebates mirror the legislation that we introduced last year, the Zero Emission Homes Act, and this new funding is going to be distributed to both state and tribal energy agencies as grants so that they can implement high efficiency electric home rebate programs that run through 2031. And the rebates will be allowed to go up to a maximum of $14,000 per household. That includes $1,750 for a heat pump water heater, $8,000 for a heat pump for space heating and cooling, $840 for an electric stove, cooktop, range, or oven, or an electric heat pump clothes dryer, $4,000 for an electric load service center or breaker box upgrade, $1,600 for insulation, and $2,500 for wiring. These rebates will help to levelize the upfront costs of installing these appliances and help many more Americans access the health, climate, and cost benefits of electrification. The Inflation Reduction Act also includes new tax credits to help more families purchase new and used electric vehicles. It includes major investments to supercharge our manufacturing base for clean and electric technologies, from heat pumps and wind turbines to batteries and solar components and EVs right here in America. And those revamped investment and production tax credits that I touched on earlier are not solely for wind and solar generation. I'm really excited that we are standing up my proposal for an investment tax credit for energy storage, which is going to be essential to shoring up reliability and resilience on the grid. This will be a 30% ITC for standalone storage projects. We have seen how these types of credits have spurred investments in wind projects over the last decade, and I'm very confident that they'll do the same for storage. So there's a lot to unpack in this bill, and I look forward to hearing from my colleague about what she's most excited about. But thank you all for getting us where we are today. We have moved mountains in the last year, and we are on the verge of getting something very deeply meaningful to the president's desk.
Well, thank you so much, Martin. I have to say, I can't think of anybody else in the Senate who is as relentless as you are at focusing on what it is that we can get done to electrify our economy for the good of consumers and for the good of our climate. So I've been so delighted to be your partner, not only in the electrification caucus, but also in the new Never Give Up caucus, which I think we are both charter members of. Thanks also to Ari and everybody at Rewiring America, and of course to the indomitable Dr. Leah Stokes, who has been such a strong advocate for explaining in the clearest language possible what this means for our planet and for American families. So I'm grateful to all of you. The Inflation Reduction Act of 2022, which Senate Democrats are on the verge of passing, is the most significant action to fight the climate emergency, to lower costs for Americans, and to put U.S. workers and manufacturers at the forefront of a clean energy future. You know, I have always believed that this clean energy transition is going to happen. The question has been whether the United States leads that transition or if we follow. And this Inflation Reduction Act puts us at the forefront, and it presents nothing but opportunity for all of us. Strong climate action and the transition to clean energy will reduce carbon emissions. Outside researchers and experts say that estimated reduction in emissions will be somewhere in the neighborhood of 40% reductions just in the next 8 years by 2030, based on the policies that are included in this legislation. This legislation will be good for the economy, creating over 1.4 million jobs by building out domestic supply chains and manufacturing and deploying those consumer rebates and tax credits that Senator Heinrich was telling us about a moment ago. And it will also be good for our health. Lower air pollution caused by fossil fuels will save lives. Estimates are somewhere between 3,700 and 3,900 premature deaths will be averted. And this is happening for poor people and people of color who are living in the places most impacted by a dangerous and deadly fossil fuel, including, as Senator Heinrich said, indoor air pollution. So this legislation is going to greatly accelerate the three main strategies that we need to deploy right now to fight the climate emergency. And the first is to clean up the electric grid by transitioning as fast as we can to clean power. The second piece of it is to make everything we do as energy efficient as possible. And then the third piece of it is to electrify everything we can, whether it's building, heating and cooling, whether it is appliances, whether it is other consumer goods, transportation, the trucks that we use to deliver our mail, everything, electrify everything as quickly as we can. The Inflation Reduction Act will allow us to do all of these things. So this is a game changer in so many ways. It has benefits in so many different ways. But one of the most important things is that it makes this upfront transition to clean electric appliances, for example, more within reach and cost effective for folks who don't have thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars sitting around in their checking accounts. This bill is going to make it possible for folks to be able to make that transition. And as the great folks at Rewiring America have told us, allow families, create a way for families to save up to $1,800 a year in energy costs. This is going to include incentives for houses, as you've heard, households to make their homes and their vehicles more energy efficient, to upgrade electric appliances that run on clean energy. And this is all going to make this upgrade that people want to make it cheaper and affordable for everyone. When we move everything that we can to clean power, we will also help protect ourselves against the volatility of energy prices. And this will allow us to also improve our energy efficiency and our energy independence and also our energy resilience. One thing that we know for sure is that energy that comes from wind and sun, it costs the same. It is free. With clean power, we don't need to worry about the geopolitics that have caused that 42% fossil fuel inflation that Ari talked about at the beginning. So I've said for months that in the Senate, we have to find a strong climate deal that has the votes of 50 senators so that we can move forward and get it done. I believe that we found the sweet spot with this legislation, and I'm so grateful to everybody who's helped to make it happen. We have to get it done now. I'm knocking on wood and look forward to celebrating when we get this over the finish line. And now I think I turn over to Dr. Stokes.
Well, thank you so much, Senator Smith and Senator Heinrich, for your partnership and leadership on these critical issues. You know, this has not been an easy process. Not everything we wanted is in the bill. Certainly the work that Senator Smith and I did is long gone from the bill, but that doesn't mean that we aren't on the verge of an absolutely transformative bill. You know, this really is the climate bill that we have been waiting in some ways, months for, in some ways years for, and in many ways decades for Congress to actually pass. I just want to underline something that Ari at Rewiring America said, which is that efficiency is electrification. If we want to save energy in our society, we need to electrify everything, because it turns out that when we burn fossil fuels, we lose about half of the energy every step along the way. It is really not the most efficient process, because what happens is we make waste heat, right? If we're turning fossil fuels into electricity, we lose about half the energy in the process. So this pathway of clean electricity plus electrification really is the solution. And actually, it will allow us to cut 75% of current carbon pollution. This is a little bit different than the math that we're all used to talking about, which is, how can we cut carbon pollution in half compared to 2005 levels by 2030. That's our benchmark. This bill is going to get us 80% of the way there. It's going to cut carbon pollution 40% below 2005 levels by 2030. But let's take a step back and think about the theory of change that we're talking about here with this bill. What is this bill going to do? It's going to put us on a pathway to clean electricity and electrification. And that pathway is going to allow us to really tackle the climate crisis by solving 75% of our current carbon pollution. How does that work? Well, first, we clean up our electricity system. We get on a pathway to President Biden's goal of 100% clean power by 2035. We are going to be on that pathway with this bill, with these amazing long-term tax credits. Those tax credits for wind and solar, and now for batteries, as Senator Heinrich talked about, they have come and gone and boom and bust, and it's been very terrible for the industry. Well, actually, this bill for the first time is a long-term extension that's going to create a lot of certainty for the industry. And that's going to help us, get on path to 100% clean power by 2035. Remember, there's also another $30 billion in addition to those tax credits for clean electricity. So we've still got great stuff in this bill. That's about a quarter of our current carbon pollution, cleaning up the grid. How do we get to that 75%? Well, we get another quarter of the solution by cleaning up our transportation sector, by getting electric cars on the road, as this bill is going to do, electric trucks. You know, what about the USPS mail trucks? Well, guess what? There's $3 billion in the bill for that too. So we're going to clean up our transportation sector. That's going to get us another quarter of the way. And then we come to the last quarter, which is that we're going to electrify about half of heavy industry. And there's, I think, $9 billion in this bill to really start moving forward on cleaning up our heavy industry. And then the real thing we're talking about today, the last slice of that pie that gets us to 75% is our buildings. We are going to electrify our buildings. That is what Senator Heinrich and Senator Smith have been working so hard to do in this bill. It's really important. And by electrifying our buildings, we're going to create jobs in the United States, because those jobs cannot be taken overseas. You want to install a heat pump, an American worker has to do it. We're going to save people money, $1,800 a year on their energy bills if they get access to these clean technologies like an EV, a heat pump hot water heater, an induction stove, you name it, solar panels. You get a household access to those things, their energy bills go down, and they go down every single year. So it's $1,800 the first year, $1,800 the second year. We're talking about savings that are going to accrue every single year. So it's going to cut pollution, it's going to create jobs, and it's going to save money. And I just want to also underline that the ZHA, as Senator Heinrich talked about it, the bill that really is part of this Inflation Reduction Act, the $4.5 billion that we've been focusing on, you know, that's targeted for low and moderate income folks. And for low income folks, we're talking about potentially covering the full cost of a heat pump hot water heater, an induction stove, the list goes on, a breaker box, helping with wiring. Wow, that's going to be transformative for people in this country. And for moderate income households, we're talking about covering half of their costs. And then over in the finance bill, thanks to Senator Wyden and others, we've got great, and also Senator Klobuchar, who worked on this too, we've got great other provisions which are going to help wealthier Americans also electrify their homes. And those provisions, they're usually capped at like $600 per upgrade, but a heat pump is the one exception. And you can get $2,000 for a heat pump, which is just absolutely transformative. So, you know, together, these investments are going to change the game. We are going to see clean electricity at a pace and scale we have never seen before. We're going to see clean electric machines rolled out all across this country at a pace we've never seen before. And that's absolutely critical, because part of our mission at Rewiring America, well, pretty much our entire mission, is to electrify 1 billion machines in this country. So we cannot wait. We have got to get started today. This bill is going to put us on the pathway that we need. And I got to say, I'm just really, really excited. It is not a perfect bill, but my gosh, is it ever progress. And the status quo is also not perfect. The status quo is full of fossil fuels. It's full of fossil fuel machines. It's full of new fossil fuel developments. We got to get off that pathway and into the clean energy future, creating American jobs in this country. And I just want to end with that last thing. One thing that folks may not appreciate is that this bill, in every single way, is about creating the clean energy industry of the 21st century here in America with good paying unionized jobs. We are talking about $60 billion of investments for manufacturing here in the United States. And then when we talk about the tax credits, you may not have noticed this. Remember the wind and solar and battery tax credits? You get extra money in those tax credits if you're actually building your project with American-made machines, whether that's a solar panel, a wind turbine, a battery. And we've also got, finally, some money for the Defense Production Act to be building heat pumps here in America. And that was something that we at Rewiring America, with the leadership of Senator Heinrich, worked tirelessly on. So this is a transformative bill. We are talking about creating the industries in the United States. And that is going to make it easier for us to get the next clean energy investment through Congress. Because guess what? When we have jobs in Republican states and Republican districts, it's going to be a lot harder for them to only be listening to the fossil fuel industry. They're going to start listening to the clean energy industries as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Sarah to start taking questions. But this is a really exciting bill, and it's a total game changer. And I cannot thank the senators enough for their endless, tireless leadership and for never giving up.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone, for your wise and wonderful words. We have a lot of questions piling up in the Q&A. So we are going to kick it off with Nico from Politico. I believe I might have gotten that wrong. Take it away.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Awesome. E&E News, owned by Politico, so you were close. So just for either senator who feels, who can answer it, there was reporting that some EV automakers were attempting to lobby or adjust language in the provisions, since domestic supply chain requirements, they say, are sometimes too difficult to meet, that are included in the reconciliation bill. Have you heard that, and any response to it? And also any concern that the EV provisions could fall out during birdbath, as some Republicans have said?
Martin, do you want to take that, or shall I?
I think I'll start and then you can jump in. I do think the domestic provisions are pretty aggressive, and I don't think we know the answer yet to just how exactly what the transition timeline is going to look like there. And certainly we're going to continue to work closely with all of the electric vehicle producers to really track that and try to take full advantage of these incentives. There's always going to be some things that fall out during the bird bath. I think it's very hard to predict what those are going to be. So we're just going to have to roll with the process there and see what comes out the other side.
Yep, I think I totally agree with that. I think that Martin is right that the domestic content goals are aggressive, but we need to be aggressive about building out, as Leah said, building out that domestic clean energy capacity here in the United States. And so, our job over the next several days is to be kind of litigating this in the kind of arcane rules of the Senate reconciliation process to protecting everything that we can. But I do think that people should understand that our mission here is to protect this bill for all of the good that it has, and we're going to do everything we can to accomplish that.
Excellent. Thank you so much, both of you. We're going to go to Hannah. I believe you're okay to ask your question live, Hannah. Hannah Grover from New Mexico Political Report. Hannah, we're not hearing you, so I'm just going to read your question out loud for the panelists. Her first question, for anyone who wants to take it: as we know, it can take more than a decade to build transmission lines, and we have seen generation projects like solar arrays delayed due to the supply chain. How does the Inflation Reduction Act ensure grid reliability as electrification increases? Let's take that one first, and then we'll go to her second question for the senator.
Well, I think one of the things this does is it really kickstarts the amount of storage on the grid, which is a huge reliability factor. And the investment tax credit that this puts in place is going to take an industry that really grew dramatically last year and supercharge it. And so that is going to be a big part of how we solve our reliability issues on the grid. There are still going to be transmission issues, and I think we need to do more on the transmission side of things, as well as on the issue of making sure that we produce more of our supply here of generation assets like solar. I think the president took a big step forward to create some certainty in that market, but we're going to need to manufacture more and more of that here. And this bill has production tax credits that will jumpstart that industry and allow us to do more and more of that manufacturing in the United States.
And I'll just add two things to that excellent summary. The first is that there are some additional resources in the Inflation Reduction Act to support the build out of transmission. I don't think that any of us think that it'll get us all the way that we need to get, but that is a really important investment and commitment. I will also say that while this bill is a compromise and all in there are things that we are agreeing to that I might not agree with. I will point out that in the side-by-side permitting reform legislation, which we don't have all the details on, I anticipate that there will be some steps taken there to assist with permitting of transmission lines, and that'll be very good for getting more clean power into the grid.
I would add maybe two other comments. The first is that history has been a guide here. In the 1950s, we doubled electricity generation in this country, and in the 1960s, we doubled it again, and it is very much tied to the market responding to demand. So there's quite a lot of work to do on the policy side to assist with that. But one of the really important aspects of the Inflation Reduction Act is that it creates certainty on the demand curves that people on the generation side and on the transmission side can start to plan for. That's been a piece of this, that the transition that we've been talking about has been happening in pockets and in piecemeal. Now we're looking at a wholesale market transformation and transition that the entire economy can plan around. And that is incredibly significant. The last thing I would just say with respect to that is that as we electrify the machines in our homes and make our homes effectively part of our climate and energy infrastructure, they themselves help with managing the load, because you start to install smart panels, and the batteries in your home start to become ways in which to smooth out demand cycles on an aggregate basis. That also helps the suppliers, generation on the generation side and transmission, plan for the investments that are really required. And that's a critical part of this as well. We're thinking about the Inflation Reduction Act is a systemic approach to the transition that we need to achieve.
Awesome, thank you. Josh Siegel, I believe you had your hand raised from the very beginning, so why don't you get right in there with your question?
Hi, Senators. Good to see you on Zoom. Nick did get ask the main question that I have. But just to be clear, I don't know how possible this is, but should Democrats reopen the electric vehicle piece and make it more accessible off the bat? I mean, I know you're saying it's aggressive, but it's good to have these domestic content goals and reshoring supply chains in general. But I mean, if they're not accessible, that obviously goes against what you're saying around making these electric technologies more affordable for people.
Well, Josh, I would just say that I really think that we should look at this bill in its totality. I think that we should not expect or anticipate that we're going to reopen this bill in any significant way to make changes to it. We want to protect the bill, and especially as as we go through this reconciliation vote-a-rama process, our mission is not going to be to change the bill, but to protect it.
And I'd be happy to add here, keep in mind that there are basically no EV supports for a lot of the big manufacturers right now. They have blown through their 200,000 car caps. So we're talking about nothing. And we're talking about trying to pass something that adds to nothing and gets us somewhere better. So it may not be perfect. Keep in mind too, there's also $4,000 for a used EV. We've never had an incentive like that before. So, we're starting from a status quo that's actually pretty terrible on EVs. And even if this credit is not perfect, which I think it is not, it is an improvement over the status quo.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody. We are now going to go to Jeff St. John. Jeff from Canary. Are you there? There you are.
Yeah, thank you. Ari, I know that you've talked about how the efficiency and electrification provisions of this bill could spur tens of billions of dollars. I think you talked to USA Today saying maybe even 100 billion or more. And just wanted to see if you could expand on how 9 billion in the HERA and Hope for Homes plus an unscored amount of tax incentive tax credit boost kind of adds up to the multiplier that you're looking at for kind of private sector market activity, and how these programs can be structured and implemented so that they don't lead to a kind of boom bust incentives disappear situation, but kind of build a steady and self-sustaining kind of private sector market transformation that you all are talking about.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff, and nice to hear you, even if we don't see you. I think it's important to think through the stacking of these incentives from the perspective of the household. So you have the rebate program that you just mentioned, Jeff, and then the tax incentives, the tax credits that are uncapped and over a 10-year window. Those tax credits apply to things like heat pumps and breaker boxes and cooktops, et cetera. They also apply to EVs, as Leah and the senators were just talking about. All of those things, the EVs, the storage, the rooftop solar, the underlying equipment in your home, that's all part of the electrification of the household. That's all part of the transition of our energy infrastructure from a fossil fuel one to a clean electric one. And those credits and rebates themselves are significant in terms of, from an uptake perspective, in terms of what they will mean on a dollar basis injected into the economy. But they are not the only things that are going to cause the increase in the affordability of those purchases. You also have the Clean Energy Accelerator and you have the Loan Program Office that are effectively buying down the cost of financing for American families to access these machines, because for the most part, these machines get financed over their life because they are big ticket purchases that are hard for households to come out of pocket for completely. That's true for cars, it's true for solar, it's true for many of the underlying machines that we're talking about. And so when the federal government is putting its the full faith and credit of the United States behind the lending power that ultimately is available to American consumers, that is also a cost reduction because it lowers the cost of credit, which translates into a lower monthly payment. And that leverage is what we think pushes this thing well north of the tens and tens of billions of dollars of access to capacity for American families. And then you asked the second question, which is the boom bust cycle. And I think it's really important to call out the structure of this bill and how it is expressly designed to not cause a boom bust cycle. And that is really in three ways. First is what Leah was just talking about, which is that the EV tax credits had these caps. And maybe that made sense, a number of years ago because there weren't really any EVs and who knew if anybody was going to buy these things. And so we'll just do a little bit here. Well, obviously that's not the case anymore. And there are no caps anymore for EV purchases. So they are going to be there for the duration of the 10-year window, and they are going to keep adding more and more incremental value to American families because the price of EVs is going to keep coming down. So they are going to be more advantageous and more powerful in years 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 than they are in years 1, 2, 3, and 4. That's true for all the tax credits in here, and it's true for the rebates as well. As we transition the economy overall, and these electric machines get more and more scale, their price points are going to come down, but the tax credits and the rebates are not changing. So they create more leverage and more value for more families, which increases the amount of attractiveness of the offer, as it were, and helps to drive more demand. So that's one way to think about the structure of the Inflation Reduction Act and why it's not sort of boom bust in its nature. The other aspect of this, which I think is important to call out, is that once a household starts on the electrification journey, you don't stop. You keep electrifying the things in your life, because when you get that Ford F-150 Lightning, you effectively got a truck with the battery that you bought. And that battery is a very powerful tool for backing up your home. But it's really hard to plug in your gas-powered furnace into your electric car. I would not recommend doing that. So you need to have appliances that have plugs and not pipes. And so as you start to convert those first machines from being fossil fuel based to being electric based, the next machines that you get, it makes sense for them to be electric too. And so that creates a wholesale conversion of what is happening in American households and a wholesale transition of the baseline from a fossil fuel baseline to an electric baseline. And the savings cascade and build on top of one another, because the more things you electrify, the more benefit you get from what you already electrified. And that's a piece of this too.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ari. Now we have a question from Mark Kuntz, CEO of Mitsubishi Electric Train US and a member of our coalition. Take it away, Mark.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Needless to say, we're very excited about the bill, very thankful to everyone that's brought it to this point. On the ZHOP portion, I kind of think of this as a cash for clunkers for homes. And my question is, does the legislation require that the fossil fueled device that was replaced be removed from the home?
Yeah, I don't believe that there is a requirement there, although I've yet to see an example of where this sort of infrastructure, when replaced, ended up actually being installed in someone else's home. That certainly hasn't been my experience with sort of the plumbers and electricians that I work with in the Albuquerque area.
I don't think that folks are going to keep both their gas furnace and their electric heat pump, maybe in some edge cases, maybe. But I think the vast majority of people are ready to go electric. And I just want to say thank you to Mark. You know, Mitsubishi is doing amazing work on heat pumps, and we're just really grateful for your leadership.
Absolutely.
Yes,
Thank
absolutely.
you.
Thanks so much, Mark. We're now going to go to Kevin Robinson Avila, who is from the Albuquerque Journal.
Yes, thanks for taking my question. Just a quick one. When do you all expect a vote in the Senate on the act?
Well, Kevin, we're still going through the bird bath process, and we have to get through that to be able to actually get what they call a votorama on the floor. My guess is that we'll probably start voting, I would say late tomorrow or early Friday. Tina, do you think that's?
I think
window?
yep, I think we'll be sort of Friday and maybe through the weekend. It kind of depends on how extended the effort is of the Republicans to stop us, because that's really going to be what makes the biggest difference in terms of time. And I can just say, speaking for myself, and I think all 50 of us, we're not going home till it's done.
Yeah, and I think that that's pretty telling. When the entire Republican Party is opposed to your agenda, you know that it's probably good news for the planet, unfortunately.
I can think of no better place to end this press conference than let's bring it home. I want to thank everybody for answering these questions, and all the panelists, all the guests who came to put them forth to us. There are many more questions that did not get answered, and we are working diligently to put answers to them and get them to you in a doc, which we will send along with the Zoom recording of this event. For further information, make sure you go to rewiringamerica.org to look at our papers, and we have another one coming out tomorrow on implications of the IRA for disadvantaged communities. So thanks so much once again to everyone on your screen right now who has worked so tirelessly to get this legislation to where it is today. And have a great day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye.